Computing is liberated entirely from, even from something as unrestrictive as a K-tie. It's liberated to show up in new places in the environment, such as the body. What we see here is an American product. It's a personal biometric monitoring system called the Body Media Sense Wear Patch. And it's kind of like a very sexy bandage. This is a prototype version. The version they have now is even smaller. It's a device that you peel an adhesive backing off of. You seat it on your arm. Your body heat wakes it up, activates it, and it immediately starts gathering 16 channels of biometric information and broadcasting them to a base station, encrypted, to a base station, where a variety of very elaborate data visualizations are performed on the information that tells you some very interesting high-level things about the state of somebody's body in real time. Its designers refer to it as a continuous beacon, producing a running physiological documentary of your body. So that's one place that computing has never really been before. It's also never really been in the room before. And there have been a variety of experiments at places like MIT and certainly PARC and Georgia Institute of Technology that seek to deploy instrumented spaces. In fact, there is an experiment at Stanford University called the iRoom, which was a heavily instrumented meeting space that was designed for the computerized support of collaborative work. And I think this is another direction that is all but inevitable with the technologies we face now. When I say computing appearing at the scale of the room, too, I don't mean in any particularly obvious way. I mean much as when electrical appliances first appeared in the home in the 1910s or so, they looked very technical. They were not adopted until designers learned to give them wooden cabinets that looked like fine furniture, that eased the psychological and emotional transition to that. So I think we're going to see computational resources distributed in physical reality in ways that don't look particularly technical, may not even look like anything at all. Georgia Tech's smart floor of, I believe, 1998, very interesting system, very expensive, very elaborate, had sensors and load cells that were buried in flooring. And it turns out that certainly for a group in this size, anytime you get over about 80 people, I think this begins to break down. But for a group of this size, it turns out that every single person in this room has a reasonably unique biometric signature associated with the way that we walk. That if there is a load cell in the floor that is able to measure the weight and the distribution of our weight on our feet and the way that we walk naturally, that we can be identified by that. It's a unique biometric signature. And Georgia Tech took this idea, and so they said, okay, well, you know, we can tell who somebody is in space, and we can tell where they are. And so that's a really wonderful opportunity for us to begin delivering services to people as they move through a structure. That was 1999. A lot of work has been done since. The example I'm showing is a commercial product called SensaCell, not quite as elaborate as the Georgia Tech Smart Floor, or indeed as the any of the current Japanese efforts towards instrumenting spaces. Very much simpler. It doesn't have the load cells. It does have processors that are able to tell you through inductive impedance where people are. The really interesting thing about SensaCell, though, it's developed by an American who had worked previously in the construction and contracting industries. And he knew how architects and contractors frame out a space when they build it. They use a square foot grid in the United States. He designed SensaCell so that it would be modular to the exact same grid that's actually used in construction. He designed it essentially to be an industrial product that's distributed cheaply. As a result, SensaCell, although it's not quite as elaborate in terms of what it can do computationally as some of the earlier experiments, it's available now. It's cheap, and it's actually been deployed. And it can tell you where you are in the room to sub-meter precision. It also, it propagates your value, not merely to a base station, but distributed through a grid of computational elements that are in each of the cells. And optionally, it can display your location by shining it through LEDs that are in some of the modules. And you can get this lovely, I've seen this in a club in New York. It's kind of, if you remember the old Michael Jackson Billie Jean video where he's kind of walking through the space and leaving this kind of trail of lights behind him. I'm not a particularly big Michael Jackson fan, but I think that image sticks in our mind if we've seen that. And in this club in New York, this is certainly the case. As people walk through the room, they leave these trails that decay over time, and it's just lovely. And as we know here in this city, of all places, we know that computing is now appearing at the scale of the street as well. And this is a lamppost in Shinjuku that has been tagged with an RFID such that, excuse me, such that if you have a universal communicator device like a Keitai that is capable of communicating with the RFID tag, it will tell you where you are. It will tell you what services are close by and are available to you. So for example, you're in this part of Shinjuku. There is a subway exit 100 meters away on your left. There is a public toilet 200 meters away on your right. And oh, by the way, Starbucks is having a sale on vanilla soy lattes. When you have computing appearing in these places all simultaneously, networked with each other, that begins to utterly, utterly transform the sorts of interactions that people have with their computing devices. And we're going to get into that in detail. It's also very, very hard to see for all of the reasons we've discussed, both literally and figuratively. And as a result of that, I think that ubiquitous computing tends towards what I call the colonization of everyday life. It has this ambition to gather every circumstance of our daily lives into it and perform that same transformational process on it. So I have two pictures on the screen that I think explain what I mean by this a little bit. The top picture is a notional prison, very famous notional prison that was designed by a philosopher named Jeremy Bentham in the 1600s. There's a central tower in this prison, and it's surrounded by a ring of cells. The cells are always lit from within, and the central tower always remains dark. So that prisoners in the cell, they can't see if the guard is in the tower or not, but the guard, should they happen to be in the tower, can see into the interior of each and every cell, and all of the prisoners in all of the cells can see each other. The idea is that when you are being watched, but you can't tell that you're being watched, you internalize the sense of being watched. You internalize the model of behavior that is being imposed on you. And this was an image that was taken up by the French philosopher of power, Michel Foucault, in a book that was titled, in English anyway, Discipline and Punish, that was translated to English in the 70s. And his idea was that this gaze was everywhere in our lives, and it was forcing us to internalize models of control that were imposed on us from without, that they became part of the retinue of our everyday gestures, that they became part of our everyday consciousness, that we were no longer free from disciplinary systems of control because they had reimplanted themselves in us. They were there all the time, whether or not we were being watched or not. The watcher was always in us. What does this have to do with everyday life and ubiquitous computing? To me, this is suggested by the image on the bottom of the screen, which is a prototype toilet called Kenko Toware. It's being developed right here by Panasonic, I believe. It is an internet toilet that analyzes your bodily wastes and transmits its findings, presumably to your doctor, possibly to your insurance company, maybe to the police, maybe to your parents. To me, this refigures what Foucault meant by the gaze. This is the new gaze. It's not visual, it's biometric, it's computational, it's algorithmic, it's environmental, and for all intents and purposes, it's eternal. Once we allow systems of this nature into our environment, we will have a very, very hard time getting rid of them, doing without them. So we had better be careful that we design them to be conscious of our values and to represent a world that we want to live in.